everybody, I am Lily of Lil Pilates, and in this quick video we're going to focus on some hip mobility and hip strengthening, so particularly outer hip, that glute med and external, and we'll actually do some internal rotation of the hip as well. I cycle a lot, so a lot of hip flexion. I also walk a lot of hip flexion over and over and over and over and over in my daily life. So if you are a cyclist or a runner, or you walk a lot and you're kind of in that forward motion in a lot of the exercise that you do, this is going to be a really nice exercise series to challenge the hip in some other planes of movement. You are going to need a prop for under your head. So a pillow, basically. You could literally use a pillow. I've got a block. You could use an inflatable ball. Try not to use your arm under head because we do want to find that length through the spine. So a prop will be really helpful for that. We're going to lay on our side. You can lie on either side first. And as we lay down, we want to line up head, shoulders over hips. So you can use the back edge of your mat as some feedback there. So bringing the prop to the back edge. And then as you lay down, you want to have the head, back of the shoulders, and back of the hips aligned with the back edge of your mat. And then make sure that bottom shoulder is underneath the top and the hips are stacked. Bend your knees in towards your chest. Try to keep your tail untucked as you do that versus tucking the tail under in that fetal position. So sit bones are wide, tail's untucked, and the top hip is reaching long. These bottom ribs, they don't have to actually lift off of the mat, but there is a feeling of liftiness, just so the spine is as stacked as possible versus sort of collapsing to the floor and then coming back up. So keep that length through everything here. And then with the heels glued together, let's clamshell, externally rotate from the muscles of the upper hip to lift the knee and then lower down. And we're going to do that like 7 more times. And I like to think, even though there is a wall behind me, but I'm not pushed up against it, you could actually lay against a wall if that's helpful. We want to make sure that we don't open up this hip towards the ceiling as we move. So we get this feeling of suctioning the thigh back into maybe the heel of the hand or into the wall behind you if you have that. So that as we lift, we get that snuggle of the thigh into the hip, and then we spiral open from the muscles of the outer butt. We're going to go for another 2, and then last 1, and hopefully that's close to 8. So on this next one, spiral into your clamshell again. So we lift up, and then I like to bring my fingertip to my kneecap just to make sure that my knee stays pretty at the same height, a little bit fixed in space. We're going to internally rotate now in the hip. So we internally rotate, the heel will lift, but try not to drop the knee as that happens. And then externally rotate, connect the heels. We're going to do that 7 more times. Internally rotate and externally rotate. So as we do this, it looks like the heel's lowering and lifting, but really it's that thigh internally spiraling and then externally spiraling from the muscles of the pelvis. So you can think about really the kneecap spiraling to face up, kneecap spiraling to face down, and hopefully because the knee's bent, we're keeping that thigh seated. This feels pretty burny, pretty fast. Let's go 1 more full time. So we'll internally rotate, externally rotate, and then we're going to settle in between your 2 extremes. So in parallel position of the hip. Knee and heel are in line with the hip, the same height, and the thigh is nice and parallel with the floor. We've still got that length through the top hip. Keep gathering through the bottom side, and then lift up and lower down. So now abduction. We move out from the midline of the body, lifting the heel and the knee at the same height. A lot of times as this outer hip fatigues, we'll lead a little bit through the heel. Try to spiral so we're parallel, maybe even leading with the knee ever so slightly in that lift and lower. We're going to go for 3 and 2 and last 1. Hold here with the knee and the heel at the same height as the hip Flexing through the foot, we're gonna straighten the leg out. That length feels kind of nice after keeping that leg bent for so long. And then as we go along, open through the front of the hip, keep reaching length without arching the low back or flaring the ribs. So keep that stability of the pelvis and the core, and then bring it back in. So now we're doing that extension, squeezing from the underside of the glute to press out, and flexion to come in. So this is the range of motion that I'm really used to with walking, running, cycling, but just that break to get the leg to reach long feels pretty nice. And then this is another one where notice if we are fatiguing through the outer hip, the knee will drop down as we go out and in. Keep those external rotators on. We're gonna go for 2. And last 1. We're gonna do one more thing, bend it in. Take a break if you need to. This is super fiery, super quick work here. We're gonna just go through it, ask for endurance, but take a break as you need to. Internally rotate here again. So the kneecap is spiraling towards the floor from that spiral of the femur, the thigh bone in the hip socket. Take the knee forward and down, and then you're gonna lift up, spiral to external rotation, and take the leg back and down. Lift up, spiral to internal, forward and down, and then lift up, externally rotate through the hip, lower back and down. Lift up, spiral to internal and lower. So we're making an infinity sign or a figure 8. And you can do circles here if your brain is just not computing this internal and external addition, but it's a nice way to get into all the edges of that ball and socket hip joint. I guess all the round corners. It's not really gonna have corners, right? So we're gonna hold here and then we're gonna reverse lift up and back into that lift and internal, lower down, swivel to external rotation to bring the knee forward and up. Lower down, internally rotate, lift up and back. And as I'm doing this, hand on the hip can be really helpful to keep the top hip reaching long. Ooh, this is Bernie. I always say the bent leg always gets me more because we have a bit more opportunity to really snuggle the thigh back, and those tiny little muscles have to work a little harder because there's less grip of hamstrings or hip flexors. And then we're gonna bring it forward. Oh my gosh, let it rest down. Those last 2 really got me. I was like, I might seize up here. So pat it out. You can use that top hand to pat it out, maybe even cross the top leg over the bottom, add a little rotation, just something to release through that side. We're gonna roll onto our backs. We're gonna do your figure 4. I was planning to do both sides and then stretch, but that was very Bernie. So let's do the first side. Laying on your back with or without the prop under your head. You're gonna bring the leg that was just working, that ankle, over the opposite thigh. And then this is my tight hip, so it might feel good to just encourage that external rotation with the bottom leg or the leg that wasn't working staying on the floor. You can also rock the shape away from the stretching hip. You let that hip lift off of the mat, so a little rotation to deepen the stretch through that outer hip. Or if you want to, try not to tense through the upper body to pull the shape towards you, but think of hip flexors on the left. So an active lift through the legs. I'm trying to keep my sit bones wide, untuck tail, and then I can grab on and give a little extra pull without rounding through the shoulders or getting tension in the neck. So try to keep the collarbones wide, the shoulders relaxed as you pull the shape in. Ooh, I'm feeling that. All right, let's take one more breath and then we'll let it go. So no real fancy transition. We're just gonna roll to the side and go to side 2. And counting is not my strong suit, so we're shooting for 8 of everything except for maybe like 5 in each direction of those infinities. So if you're a good counter and you want to make it super even, shoot for about 8 on each side. We're going close to that, but All right, so laying on your side, again, I'm gonna scoot my hips a little bit forward. They were back a little bit. Make sure the head and the shoulders are stacked on top of the wrists, or on top of the hips, and then knees in towards the chest, trying not to tuck the tail under as you do that. So keep sticking the butt out, bottom ribs gather up and in, top hip reaches long, clamshell lift and lower. And you might notice that bottom side, still Bernie, still talking to you as we transition to side two. It did a lot of work and now it's doing kind of a surprising amount of stabilizing. So as you do this clamshell and all this other work on this second side, you may need to take a break. You take a break. The second side's usually a little more fatiguing or fatigued than the first. We're gonna spiral open to your clamshell, hold here. Fix the knee in space either with the finger there if that's helpful, or just keep it from dropping as you internally rotate, heel lifts, externally rotate, heel lowers. Connect those heels. Get that spiral of the outer hip to connect the heels and then spiral back into internal. And we're gonna do that a few more times. Internally rotate, externally rotate. And we'll go about 3 more just like that. I'm trying to think of wrapping the side body in towards the midline. So abdominals are helping to stabilize as well as the bottom leg. And then last time, we internally rotate, externally rotate, connect those heels, and then spiral into that midpoint between those two. So keeping the hip long, hip stacked, bent knee lifts and lowers, or bent leg lifts and lowers. So now again into abduction, some different muscles coming on, maybe feeling some burniness through some different parts, or maybe it feels like just that the parts that were working in your internal and external are really firing now. So again, keep that pelvic stability top of mind. If you start to lose it, take a break, make the range of motion smaller. We're gonna go for another 3 and 2, and then last 1, lowering down so that the knee and the heel are in line with the hip, a little flex through the foot, and then we extend the leg, take a break, getting out of that bent leg position, a little squeeze through the backside to reach long without arching the low back, keep the pelvis neutral, and then bend in, and then press out, and bend. So as we go out and in, again, watching the knee maybe drooping down as you come back into home or even as you press out. And also try to think like you're moving through molasses or honey, something thicker than air. So you get the muscles to work a little more actively, like you're pushing into something. Last 2. And last 1. On this next one, we bend in so that the knee is right in line with the hip. We're at that 90-degree bend at the hip and knee here. We internally rotate, take the knee forward and down and internal, lift up, spiral to external rotation, lower that heel back and down, lift the leg up, internal spiral, lead forward and down with the knee, lift up and lead back and down with the heel. Lift up, internal rotation to lower, lift, external rotation, back and down. Last time in this direction. And then finding that back in space. I think we're reversing at a different place than side 1, but that's okay. You're gonna lift up with the knee, lower down, spiral to internal, and lead up and back with the heel in your internal. Lower down, spiral to external, lead up and forward with the knee, and then lead up and back with the heel. And then again, sometimes the more I cue it, the more confusing it is. So figure 8, draw that infinity sign with your leg. And then this will be our last one. And oh my gosh, on this side too, it's like those last 2 reps get so burny so fast. Ugh, lower down, pat it out. Maybe you're like, I felt it on rep 1. Maybe you're like, I'm doing great. One day might feel very different than the other. So again, remembering stability through the pelvis as we dissociate, mobilizing at the hip and strengthening the glutes is really the goal. So, pause as much as you need to. Make the range of motion smaller if you need to, so that the pelvis stays still, spine stays still. Let's get our stretch on this second side. And one hip might be tighter than the other. So as you bring the ankle over top of your thigh, I took a big sigh. My dog also took a big sigh in the background, if you heard that. She's with us. She's feeling this. So we're going to drag, or not drag, but lift that shape in towards the chest, only if you want to deepen the stretch. And then hands can come behind the thigh and pull in. And if that feels like too much, that stretch can feel really intense when we do it right after working that side. So you can also let the leg come back down, add rotation, either with the leg down or with the leg up. Can rotate a little bit too. We'll take one more breath there, wherever feels like a good stretch for you. And then uncross the legs, and then roll to the side or roll up. All right, that is all we're gonna do for that video. Pretty burny. Do that a couple times a week, and that should really help to start strengthening through that outer hip, especially when we, again, do a lot of flexion in our daily lives. It's nice to mobilize and strengthen the hip in a different way. Really nice at-home version for that. If you have any questions, please let me know in the comments. If you like this video and would like to see more, I'd love for you to subscribe, and I'll see you next time. Thanks. Bye.